Alright guys, now we're going to work on some rational equations here. These are a little different than the linear equations with fractions. Why? Because we have x's now in the denominator of the fractions. And so before we even think about solving or get started, we need to ask ourselves, hey, what can x not equal? Now, why would x not equal something? Because what's the one number we can never, ever, ever divide by? 0. So in other words, 2x cannot equal 0 ever. All right, the mathematical world as we know it like blows up when you divide by 0. All right, so if 2x cannot equal 0, in other words, 2 times what number would give us 0? 0. All right, it's a very common mistake with you guys to oftentimes think minus 2 here. All right, in terms of opposite sign of addition and subtraction. But what is 2 times negative 2? Negative 4. Can we divide by negative 4? Absolutely. All right, and so it's 0. X cannot equal 0. Okay, same thing here with this 3 times x. The only way we're going to get a 0 in that denominator is if x is 0. All right, and so we just need to keep this in mind. All right, why? Because there's going to be situations where we do all this work, we solve it, and we get down here and it's going to say x equals 0. All right, so in my math lab, are you going to check x equals 0 as your answer? Absolutely not. You're going to say there's no solution because x cannot equal 0. All right, so moving on to the second part that we need before we can get started, and that is we need to know what the least common denominator is. All right, so I look at this, I have a 2x, I have an 18, and I have a 3x. In terms of the x's, I'm going to take the highest power that I see. Okay, so this x has a 1 power, this x has a 1 power, and so my least common denominator will have an x to a 1 power. All right, note I did not put x squared because I do not have an x squared up here. All right, secondly, I need to know what number to put in front of this x. Okay, well, what numbers do I have? I have a 2, I have an 18, and I have a 3. All right, so what is my least common denominator? Well, it's going to be the number that divides evenly. 2, 18, and 3 will divide into. Okay, so let's consider our largest number, 18. Does 2 divide into 18? Absolutely. Does 3 divide into 18? Absolutely. So our least common denominator is going to be 18x. Now, what does that mean, least common denominator? That means that is the term that I am going to multiply every single term by. Why? Because ultimately we want to get rid of fractions. We can't begin solving this until we get rid of those fractions in the same way we did with the linear equations. Secondly, note I put it above a 1. All right, why would I do that? Just for those of you who need to keep in mind that when we multiply fractions, we multiply straight across. I will never multiply the 18x by these denominators. I'm going to use the 18x to try to simplify or get rid of these denominators. Does it work? Let's see. All right, I have a 2x and an 18x. All right, I am going to write this as 18x times 5 all over 2x. All right, many of you will skip this step. The reason I'm doing this is so some of you can see how everything simplifies. All right, and I have an 18x times 17 all over 18, and a minus 18x all over a 3x. So let's see how everything cancels, and I can assure you we will in fact end up with no fractions. Well, the x's cancel. Does 2 go into 18? Absolutely. Goes in there 9 times. How about this one? Do the 18s cancel? Of course they do. Right? And over here, the x's again cancel, and the 3 goes into 18 6 times. And so what do we have left out of this? All right, we have a 9 and a 5, which together make 45, equals an x and a 17, and I'm going to write it as 17x. Just keep in mind we always write the numbers first. I didn't want to write x17. Minus 6. And now, whoa, look at this. what started out so hideously ugly actually isn't that bad of a linear equation to solve. All right, so how are we going to solve this? Remember, we need to move the 6 to the other side, so I'm going to add 6. All right, and what does this give me? This gives me 51 equals 17x. All right, and I want to get this x by itself. So how am I going to undo this multiplication? I'm going to divide both terms by 17. And in the end, I get x equals 3 as our final answer.